All right, this is a beautiful day. I'm at the Patterson Boutique Hotel. This beautiful old sandstone building was started building around 1890, and then I think it was finished in 1891, 1892. So some of the sandstone is kind of crumbling up there. There's a turret up here. Yeah, there's that beautiful stained glass. There's the turret window. That roof is all slate. See how it's kind of crumbling? It's even crumbling now, the sandstone. It's the problem with it. It's very beautiful, but it's not very hard and it doesn't last forever. That's one thing. Here's lichen here. There's even lichen growing on it. Here's the entrance. Beautiful. Let me show you up here. Many years ago, there was a huge chimney that went up even above that top portion of that roof, and it was part of this right here, and it was taken down somewhere between 1908 and 1948. They're not sure if it maybe fell or if it just was starting to crumble and they took it down because they didn't want it falling on anybody. But there's a turret, and that's the this is the carriage house right over here. That's where they stored the horses and the carriage. That would be equivalent to a detached garage right now, but nowadays, beautiful old building. There's a stained glass here. That roof is slate. Lasts forever. So the reason it's called the Croke, Patterson, Campbell. So Thomas Croke was the first to have this built. But right before he had this built, his wife died. I think she died in like 1889. And but he continued on having it built, and then he moved in. He lived here for 6 months, and then he lived here with his 2 kids and his parents, and then unfortunately right after they moved in, his mom died as well. So they say he kind of wanted to move out after that, and then he owns some real estate in Thornton and Broomfield area. And Croke, actually, the first guy who owned this, Croke Lake and Croke Reservoir are named after him. He was into irrigation as well, but he was known as the carpet man in the late 1890s because he owned like a carpet store. Before that, he was in another business with 2 other guys, and they sold things like a mercantile, like kind of like a, I guess what would be like kind of like a Sears is right now, or Montgomery Ward or something like that. And then, but he only stayed in here for 6 months, and then Patterson, Thomas Patterson. So there were 2 Thomases that owned this at the beginning. Thomas Patterson was a lawyer, and then he was also a state senator. He was also a House of Representatives, and so he wanted this house, and I think he exchanged it for 1,400 acres of land north of Denver. And then Croke said, yeah, you can go ahead, you can have this house. And I guess it took $40,000 to build this house. They said it was 12 to 18,000, but it was actually like 40,000 according to Patterson's letter This is the back side of the Croke Patterson. You see how it's kind of crumbling here. Wow. What's this? It's on the National Historic Sites here in Colorado, so hopefully it'll still be around for a little while. Oh, there's that room with that scary trellis there. Those stairs. Yeah, so Thomas Patterson, he owned it till he died 1915, 1916, and he deeded it over to his daughter, Margaret. And she was actually married to a guy named Campbell, and they had kids. Then I think they sold it right around 1928 to a real estate company, and then they divided it up into like six different apartments for a while. So it was apartments for a while, and it was a place where a band orchestra used it for a while. A radio station used it for a while. A guy named Dr. Archer Sudan bought it, let's see, around 1948, and he stayed it till 1958. His wife, in 1950, Tulene was her name. She actually committed suicide in this house. Not sure why. Nobody never knows why. Those records are kind of all gone, and she's actually buried in where is she buried? I have it in my notes here. And that they had a son, Archer Jr., Dr. Archer Sudan Jr., and he lived here for a little while too. He lived here from after his dad moved out in 1958. He owned it till like 1972. But his mom, Tulene Sudan, she committed suicide. Where is she buried? Mount Olivet Cemetery, Wheat Ridge. And her son, Dr. Archer Sudan Jr., is buried over in Fairmount. I'm not sure where Mr. Archer Sudan, Dr. Archer Sudan Sr. is buried, but I guess he moved somewhere to Boulder County in 1958. Yeah, so they were both doctors, and prior to that, Dr. Archer Sr., he was a country doctor out in Kremling for many years until he bought this Croke Patterson in 1948. And then unfortunately his wife, like I said, she committed suicide in 1950 by mixing rat poison water and some kind of calcium phosphate or something. And actually she died quite quickly with that mixture. And then so Dr. Sudan actually got married to a different lady, and finally moved out in 1958. 1972, some lady, the last name of Ray, she took over the Croke Patterson mansion, and it was then that she was the one that kind of got it onto the National Historic Society register. That helped it out. And then during the, I guess in the 1970s, when she actually sold it to another guy, and then they were doing some work in this house, and the tools and some of the equipment kept going missing, so they thought maybe the homeless people were stealing it. So they had a couple dogs, I think they were German Shepherds, and those two German Shepherds, originally the story was like 3 German Shepherds, but they say it's definitely 2. They say this is a true story, that maybe that window right there, they were either jumped out of that window, or they were thrown out of that window, and then they landed here and died on the ground here. So that's kind of a weird story. Going back to Thomas Croke, they said he stepped 1 foot in the house and says, "Oh, I'm going back out," but that's a very erroneous story, very error story. He actually lived here for 6 months. And then they said another thing, that the silver crash in 1893 kind of made his finances a little bit less than desirable, so he couldn't afford the house anymore. So he kind of for 1,400, I think it was 1,400 acres. Exchanged the house for 1,400 acres in North Denver to Patterson. Patterson took over the house then. And then just recently it became the Patterson Inn. And there have been a lot of books and a lot of ghost stories associated with this mansion. This is the carriage house over here, by the way. The carriage house even has an upstairs, but they wouldn't let me go upstairs. But back in those days, a carriage house was basically a detached garage. What a detached garage is now. And then I used to know a guy named Joe, Mr. Joe Soto. And I think he lived over in this building right here many years ago. But he was another guy I like to talk with. He knew a lot of ghost stories. He was fascinated with the Old West, especially gunslingers of the Old West. And I'm actually fascinated with history, so we always talked all the time. Joe, unfortunately, 10 years ago, died of either liver cancer or pancreatic cancer. But yeah, I'm staying here at the old Croke Patterson. And if you really want to say it correctly, I guess it's the Croke Patterson Campbell mansion, because Patterson's daughter Margaret married Campbell, and then later on they got a house over near York Street, on York Street, and they might have even moved out of the house before 1928, but they owned it till 1928, and then they sold it to a real estate company, which divided into 6 apartments. But now it is a bed and breakfast type hotel. That sandstone is really crumbling right there. If you want to check out an interesting book, it's right here too. This has a lot of history of this book, but very interesting. And the bar is in there now. I actually had a beer. I had a Deo's Pale Ale, and anybody can go into that bar, actually. Anybody on the street. You don't have to be a guest in the hotel. You can just go and have a beer. It's kind of a cool place to have a beer. I wonder if I can walk this way. I've always been fascinated with this old house. Let's take a walk over here, see if we can find anything over here. Here's the alley. Like I said, this is the carriage house. You can see where they kind of painted it. Obviously the paint doesn't look as good as the natural sandstone color. You know, this house is 14,000 square feet, but it sure doesn't feel like 14,000 square feet to me. I was expecting it to be quite a bit bigger. Here's another picture. See that slate roof? And then there's some copper up there. Huh. There's some other decorations on top. Copper. You can tell it's copper because it turns green. Alright, this is the Croke Patterson Campbell Mansion. I bet you this is kind of a door where the horses came through. Oh, by the way, Patterson was also Thomas Patterson. He was a lawyer, and he was a senator, House of Representatives as well. But he also owned the Rocky Mountain News. So they say whenever there's a extravagant story going on, his ghost comes out. How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Good job,
Alright guys, I'm gonna see if there's any ghosts tonight. Spend the night. See if I experience any ghosts. I'll let you know. George Sawtooth, God bless.